This is Toledo Symphony Lab, a behind-the-scenes look at the world of classical music from WGTE Public Media and your Toledo Symphony. I'm Brad Cresswell. Joining me today are the Toledo Symphony's president and CEO, Zach Vassar, also artistic administrator and principal second violin, Merwin Sue, and our special guest today is Rachel Zeithamel, who is director of education for the TSO. Welcome, everybody.
Delighted to be here.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Glad to have you along today. Now, we have a lot to talk about. The subject of the day is education, which we know is very important for any arts organization. So we have a lot of different things to talk about and a lot of different stories to tell. I thought it would be nice to begin with our own stories. I asked each of you to give me some music that perhaps was, seminal for you and opening your eyes to the world of classical music. And I am going to actually put myself out there as the first example. I have a couple of things that came at different parts of my life. The first thing is I still remember very distinctly playing the piano when I was 7 years old and working in that John Sham Green book. And my favorite song was a piece called Bone, Sweet Bone. Do you know Bone, Sweet Bone? Are you familiar with it?
I do not know Bone, Sweet Bone.
You don't know Bone, Sweet Bone?
Might we get a...
It could be played as a duet. But I thought about, trying to tape myself playing it on the piano. But if you go to YouTube, there are about 50 or 60 different examples of pianists of varying degrees of competence trying to play Bone, Sweet Bone, which is really quite remarkable in and of itself. But it's simple. It just is bone, sweet bone, bone, sweet bone, bone, sweet bone, sweet bone, bone, sweet bone, bone, sweet bone, bone, sweet bone, sweet bone. And you can do it as a duet if you want to. So later on, maybe we can do a little concert for the folks at home. So that, for me, for some weird reason, stands out in memory. And then after that, when I was in high school, I had a humanities teacher who played a recording for our class, and I became really interested in opera. So I want to play a little bit of this for you now. I don't know, maybe it was the laugh that got me when I first heard it. But, just imagine a bunch of high school students sitting in the room listening to this recording and this singer named Caruso, going by one name. And it really grabbed everybody's attention. I remember the class being held in rapt attention by this voice, whether it was, kind of a morbid fascination or whether they were really grabbed by the music. I don't know. But for me, it was the music. Of course, this is also around the time of that Rice Krispies commercial. Remember that? No more Rice Krispies. We have no more Rice Krispies.
And then they all cry.
Yeah, exactly. So when we got to the end, I thought, I know that. That's the Rice Krispies theme. And not too long after that, I remember hearing some music from Carmen and thinking, I know that. That's like the theme to the Bad News Bears. So I started making all these different connections between stuff I saw in the popular media and classical music. Here it is. Here's the part that really got me. Recording, even though it was made like over 100 years ago.
That was a new release when you heard it?
Yeah. That voice just standing out as such a remarkable example of singing. And I remember running to the library after that and checking out recordings of tenors. I was into tenors, and I kept finding all of these different recordings of tenors. I was like Franco Corelli and Di Stefano and Richard Tucker and Mario Domenico and all these. I'm like, why does nobody know these people? Because they're so good, but I was the naive one of the bunch. And then many years later when I was singing, I had the good fortune to sing this role of Pagliacci at the Teatro Colón in Buenos Aires, a house which was actually opened by Caruso. He sang Aida there back in 1908. You can go to YouTube now and find videos of his triumphant arrival in the harbor in Buenos Aires and making his way to the theater. So that was quite a full circle experience for me. So that's my story, right? Waste a little time with that.
It's a good story. We were talking off air about the modern re-recording of the Caruso Dream Recital, I think they called it, and it's important to have that because when you listen to these very old recordings that are a century old, and you start to think about what technology must have been like at that time to capture something like that, and then you play the old Caruso voice with a modern orchestra. It takes away some of the inhibitions that we might have when listening to an old recording, and you realize what a great actor he was, and how that sobbing at the end is really just fantastic.
Yeah, it's not a caricature. I mean, that has been turned into a caricature by many other people, but certainly not in the case of Caruso. And the fact that was able to speak to young people, I think it has a powerful message to it as far as education goes. Well, Zach, let's hear your examples. You offered up a couple of things. The first one was Prokofiev, Romeo and Juliet, and the scene at Juliet's tomb, Romeo at Juliet's grave. Yeah. This is a recording with Chicago Symphony under Riccardo Muti. I just want to bring it up here. Again, music that does not sound too happy.
No, but it was so powerful to me. I was a little kid when I went to see the Toledo Symphony for the first time, and this is the music that ended the concert. And I just remember spending the whole time in awe that I was seeing a live orchestra, because I'd always wanted to go with my parents, and they finally took me. And this music was new to me at that concert, and I was just hypnotized by it. So by the time we get to the end of Romeo and Juliet, I just couldn't let it out of my mind. And there's a piccolo at the end of this that... let
me see if I can fast forward us to the end.
It just takes us out, and it all of it disappears into this very high, perfect piccolo. And I remember on the way out to the car and all the way home and for the rest of the weekend, I just kept thinking about this eerie and stirring music. And, you talk about moments that change your life, and I think that really was one for me.
Yeah. Here's the ending of it, and the piccolo's going to come in any minute here.
And you have the extremes of the orchestra here, the very high and the very low.
Yeah. Music that terrifies every piccolo player that has to pick it up and play it, right?
It really was, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Now you have another example.
Yeah, I didn't know I was going to get two. I thought I'd give you the choice.
No, I like the fact that everybody gave multiple examples. So we'll listen to a little bit of Mahler, a composer that I know you are crazy about.
I am.
And have been crazy about for a long time. Was this your first time ever hearing Mahler?
So I remember very distinctly a point when my dad was showing me through his LP collection, and my mom and dad had an enormous record collection, and he said, just listen to anything and you see what you like. And then he kind of thought of it for a second. He said, but maybe stay away from those. And those were the Mahler LPs.
That was the forbidden fruit.
It was.
That set you on the path, right?
And I'll be honest, when I didn't think anybody was paying attention, I would put on, the middle of the Resurrection Symphony or something, and it would make no sense to me. But he just said, you might want to be a little older. It's a little more intense. And I was 16 years old when the Toledo Symphony performed Mahler's Third, and it was the first time I'd ever heard a note of Mahler. And I remember I had a magnificent head cold. I had snot in my eyes were all goopy, and I just was in like the worst possible place.
As you're saying that, the other people are like leaning away from you.
But I just remember it was one of those situations where I couldn't breathe through my nose. Otherwise it would make a terrible sound for everybody around me. So, I'm having this just amazing experience hearing Mahler for the first time. And at the finale, at the end of the finale, I just remember I had to look up at the ceiling of the peristyle, which kind of looks like a sky. So I think of this as the sky. And I remember all of the columns were in my peripheral vision, and I had to look up because like I was so overwhelmed by the music. I couldn't take in any more musical data. It was so emotional and so overwhelming for me that I had to look up just to kind of not take in anymore. Mm-hmm. And I just remember the tears were down my face, as was the snot. And everybody gets up and they're applauding at the end, and I'm just wasted, and I am so emotionally spent. But I knew as I walked out, 16 years old, that Mahler was going to become a very important composer to me.
Yeah. Here's a little bit from the final movement. This theme in here always reminds me of that song, I'll be seeing you in all
I do the same
old
thing.
Familiar places, right? Again, these are rather heavy-handed pieces of music for young people to kind of get interested in.
But the thing about this movement, this moment, is so gloriously simple.
Yeah.
And this could very much, I could have submitted this movement as well, but I mean, as a second violinist in the McGill Symphony Orchestra, I talk about kind of transporting moments as a performer, and as an orchestra player, I think it's very difficult to have those moments because there's so many people and so many elements that have to align. And this is one of the handful of movements that ever happened for me where I just felt every single person in that room was on the same page.
Yeah. Remember when did you pick up the violin and start learning that instrument?
I was about between 4.5 and 5 years old, something around then. Yeah.
Was it your parents that got you into that, or how did that work?
It was a very unusual sort of circumstance because I didn't actually go to a young people's concert. I went to a kind of a masterworks concert of the Edmonton Symphony Orchestra, and Cho Liang-Lin was playing. And I don't remember this as much as my parents do, but they remember it because I sat still, possibly for the first time ever. And I told them that I wanted to do that. I don't think they ever really had a sense that violin was a career, but I wanted to play that. And so that's how I started playing. It wasn't actually one of the recordings I submitted to you. Cho Liang-Lin's an excellent player, but I believe he was actually playing the Sibelius Concerto. But I think it was a little bit less of a sense of what the piece was and more a sense of that particular sound.
Yeah. Well, here's a violinist that you did send me, and that is Yehudi Menuhin.
Wonderful.
Playing Beethoven. What is it about that sound and that performer that grabbed your ear at a young age?
You know, I think I didn't quite grasp that this had to be a young age thing. This was something that...
You're still young, it's okay.
The concerto itself reminds me very much of my high school teacher, Ranald Sheen. And I've been very, very fortunate with all of my teachers. But I remember wanting to play the Beethoven Concerto at the age of 14. And this is something, for listeners who aren't familiar with the concerto, it's one of the pillars of the repertoire and is generally held off to quite late in somebody's educational development. And I asked Mr. Sheen, can I do this concerto? And he thought about it and said, why not? Beethoven's dead.
He's not going to complain.
And he let me struggle with this concerto for 3 solid months before we kind of mutually, decided, this is, you've hit a wall here. But it was wonderful for me because it showed me how much I needed to learn, how much further I needed to go.
Yeah.
And I think that was really the first time I fully comprehended what it meant to be a professional musician. But with Menuhin, I think Menuhin was somebody who at first I didn't appreciate, because he is an exceptional player, but was never a perfect player. And to me, like, growing to appreciate the humanity and the soul that Menuhin brought to playing was something that was part of my undergraduate education. I kind of was able to learn that music is not just the notes. It's not just what you're executing with the notes. It's what you're telling, what you're communicating, and the notes just are a vehicle for that.
Yeah. So there wasn't really a piece of music that got you interested in music. You were already well on your way, but it was kind of a watershed moment.
It was
for you
very much
as
so.
a young musician. I mean, we would have to go back to like what you were listening to at age 4, I imagine, to find.
Well, I think, and this is something I didn't have a recording for, but I was going to sleep at night when I was probably about 6 or 7. There was an Encores album that Itzhak Perlman recorded, and there was this.
It wasn't Bone Sweet Bone, was it?
It was right there. No, but there was a piece called Souvenir d'Amérique, or Variations on Yankee Doodle, and it's by Henri Vieuxtemps. And I loved that track, and so listening to, Perlman play that so many nights as I was young, falling asleep. That's the one song on that album that sticks in my mind, and I remember that being the first solo I actually ever played with the Toledo Symphony. That was a cool thing for me.
Well, I want to bring Rachel in here. This is one of the pieces that you chose. What is this?
So this is The Cat and the Mouse by Copeland.
Oh, my.
Yeah. So
Was that the cat or the mouse?
who knows? But I played this, I think it was 7th grade. And I am pretty introverted person. And I was at a music camp. And I played this for the final closing concert, and I got a standing ovation. And of course, there was a boy that I thought was kind of cute the whole, the 2 weeks at camp, and he stood up, and it was the first time that I realized that I like this. Like, I like being a musician and doing something special. It makes me a little bit different.
So you were the cat and the boy was the mouse.
Maybe. But it was also the first time that I was listening to a piece. Well, it's the first time that I remember playing a piece that had a recording of it, because I didn't listen, unlike Merwin and Zach, I didn't listen to classical music growing up. And so I'm used to playing out of my method books, Bone Sweet Bone, stuff like that. And so when I played a piece that actually had a professional recording, I was like, wow, I'm playing real music right now. And so that was cool. And then I thought that it sounded like sound effects for a movie. And so I went through a period of time when I wanted to be a sound effects person.
Really? Did you sit at the piano and kind of like do a little plucking of the strings and making weird noises and things?
Yeah, totally.
So Halloween was one of your favorite times.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you envious of Brad's soundboard?
I did have a little bit of jealousy when the first episode that you brought that in.
I keep forgetting I have the soundboard.
So wonderful when you forget.
Yeah. Wait a minute. I think somebody... hang on.
You're going to disrupt one of Rachel's seminal memories with...
No. We'll keep going here.
What I love about what just happened here is that as soon as Brad played this, your face just lit up, Rachel.
Yeah.
And you could just see that a great memory was sparked, or a great happiness was.
Here's the one that
instituted.
Rachel likes, I think. Oh, well, it would help if I turned it on. Let's try again. There we go. Let me try that again. Here's the one. Here's the one that Rachel likes. Ready?
Yes.
Was that good?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
I bet you could play that on the piano if you tried. We could find a way.
Yeah.
Find a way to do it. Or we'll just have a little Copeland arrangement. Anyway, as you were saying,
yeah, so that was the first time that I thought I like this. I could foresee doing this, and something that not everybody can do. And that really spoke to me and kind of gave me an outlet actually for my emotions. Now we're getting really deep. Sorry.
That's okay.
But I always use music as kind of an escape. And being the youngest of only 3 children, I don't know how Zach did it with like 30 children in his family, but anything that would that I could do different than my sisters. And so that was definitely piano was something.
So it's 3 girls. You're like the Cindy Brady of the group.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so that was nice. It was something that made me different. And then just seeing when the people stood up, I was like, yeah, this is pretty cool.
So it gave you a sense of empowerment.
Yeah.
I think a lot of young performers have that experience, don't you think? And so, Rachel, now you are a director of education at Toledo Symphony. Tell us about what you do in your capacity in that role.
Trying to bring education to all members of the community. Mm-hmm. So from the littlest all the way up to through adults. We have the Toledo Symphony School of Music, which has music and movement classes for toddlers. We have Suzuki lessons for various instruments. We have the Toledo Youth Orchestras. We have adult classes that we have started recently as well. But then we also have young people's concerts that bring in students that may not have the parents that want to attend symphony concerts, but this gives them an opportunity to see the orchestra. So it's exposing, just talking about the students for a while, exposing the children to opportunities that I didn't have growing up, just how my family raised us. And so trying to give them the opportunities and the experience. Now,
you say you didn't have these opportunities when you were growing up, but were you exposed in school to any of this?
My sisters and I were all required to take piano lessons when we were 6 years old. And from, the church lady down the street. Mm-hmm. And so being the youngest, when my middle sister started, she was 6, I was 3, I just begged for piano lessons. Yeah. And so I started shortly thereafter. As far as the school music program, we had the general music classes, but nothing too big. It was the bell choir of church and, little Sunday school songs and stuff like that.
In just the few minutes that we have left, I want to talk about what we can do to address that deficiency in music education, right? I know Toledo Symphony is doing a lot with the Toledo Symphony School, but above and beyond that, how do we reach kids? Because, there's a whole litany of benefits that education brings to the child, music education brings to the child. We don't necessarily have to go through all of those, and some of them are just, common sense, that it helps you learn how to work together, that it helps you think in a certain way. It exercises your brain. It helps you develop self-confidence, especially for people who aren't necessarily into sports or some other activity where you normally build your self-confidence as a young person. So
it is part of the symphony's mission. We have a couple of different mission statements, but the one that I always go back to talks about having professional musicians, but also educators who create excellent quality performances and music education opportunities for all. So I think the orchestra has identified somewhere along the way that maybe if the schools weren't going to do this, that we would have to do this ourselves. And these are obviously decisions that were made before I came on board, but I'm really happy when I walk through the symphony offices around 4:00 and school children are starting to come in for their lessons. And the place takes on a very different character, whereas a lot of the hallways are a little quiet during the day because everyone's typing at their computers. Now you start to hear strains of violins and pianos, teachers starting to talk through lessons with their students, and it really puts a foundation for us that this is what we're doing this for. We have a future of musicians that we're only beginning to meet now, and we can inspire them to think differently.
Yeah. What do you think, Merwin?
I think one of the challenges when we're trying to assert the relevance of music education is that one of the greatest things about teaching music is that it's something that you have to work for an extended period of time for to really get the gratification. It's an immensely great life skill, but unfortunately, I think when one has to account for music educational programs, the people who are demanding that accountability want instant accountability. They want this sense of, well, how many people showed up this year versus how many people showed up last year? Is there an increase? Is that good? Or it isn't this, what we're trying to teach is something that requires a perseverance. And in a way, that's something that we need to be able to communicate better to grant writers, to people who are supporting educational programs, because these are not instant gratification sorts of programs. These are programs that help develop people's ability to persevere, and we need to, as an organization, persevere in making those statements.
Yeah, and you have to sell it too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's a long game. I had my first piano students I started when they were 3 years old, just graduated from high school, and they were playing piano that entire time. And I just admire the parents for sticking with it and just knowing that that's the right thing to do. But I think as far as, I honestly think some parents don't know where to go. I think that some of them think, oh, classical music, that's just kind of stuffy. And so shows like this that help people realize that classical music can be fun and, help them realize that it's for anybody, especially our symphony. It's affordable to go visit and we have some great concerts. But I want to go back to what you said about how you heard, you realized that the music that you were listening to in the mainstream media, like on the Rice Krispie commercials and stuff, that was taken from real works. And I think that that's kind of a nice thread to get from point A to point B to help people realize you're listening to classical music all over the place.
Right. It's not the dreaded boogeyman that many people think of when they hear that word classical music, those words. Before we wrap it up, Rachel, if somebody is interested or they want to get their kids involved in music, what's a good way to contact you or to contact the symphony?
I would say go to our website, www.toledosymphony.com, or else give me a call. So my number is 419-418-0022. I'm happy to
write that down. 419, say it again.
418-0022.
Okay, great. That's about all the time that we have. I mean, we barely made a dent in this whole issue of education, but I thought it would be at least a good start to bring up and talk about our own personal experiences and how they relate to what we're doing now and what the symphony is doing now, which is quite a lot for our community. So it's a wonderful resource. I hope that people will take advantage of it. My thanks to everybody for joining me today, to Zach, to Merwin, and also to Rachel Zeithamel, Director of Education for Toledo Symphony. Toledo Symphony Lab is generously underwritten by a gift from the estate of Barbara Garwood and is a production of WGTE Public Media in collaboration with our sponsor, the Toledo Symphony. You can download episodes of this program as a podcast by going to our website. That is at WGTE.org. And don't forget, we want to hear from you. Our question and answer line is open. Leave your comments or your questions at 419-418-0012. And we may use your voice in a future episode. And remember, you can always check out all the events at the Symphony by visiting their website at ToledoSymphony.com and through their various social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm Brad Cresswell. You've been listening to Toledo Symphony Lab here on Public Radio FM 91.